You don't feel it when it happens. There's no receipt, no notification, no vote. Yet every time a modern war drags on longer than expected, you pay for it anyway. Not with a line item called war tax, not with a deduction on your paycheck, but through something quieter, something so normalized it barely registers as a cost at all. And that's exactly why it works. Because the most effective tax in history is the one almost no one realizes they're paying. Imagine this. A government announces a new military operation overseas. The price tag is enormous, hundreds of billions, maybe trillions over time. In the past, that kind of spending required a choice: raise taxes, cut domestic programs, or ask citizens directly to sacrifice. During World War II, governments issued war bonds. Taxes went up. Rationing was public and visible. Everyone knew there was a cost, and everyone felt it. Today, something very different happens. The war starts, the money appears, and life at home barely changes. No mass tax hikes, no ration cards, no immediate pain. So where does the money come from? That question is the entire story. To understand the hidden tax, we need to start with a simple fact that sounds boring but changes everything. Modern governments don't need to collect money before they spend it. They can spend first and deal with the consequences later. Here's how. When a government wants to fund a war, it doesn't usually empty a vault of saved cash. It issues debt, treasury bonds, IOUs. These bonds are sold to investors, pension funds, foreign governments, and, this is the key, central banks. If demand for those bonds isn't strong enough, the central bank steps in. It creates new money, digitally, instantly. No trucks, no printing presses you ever see, just numbers added to a balance sheet. The government gets the money, the war gets funded, and the bill is quietly pushed into the future. This is where the hidden tax begins. When new money enters the system, it doesn't hit everyone equally. It enters specific points. Defense contractors get paid. Weapons manufacturers get contracts. Logistics firms, private security companies, consultants, and suppliers all receive fresh dollars first. They spend it, they invest it, they bid up assets. By the time that money spreads through the broader economy, through wages, prices, and everyday transactions, it has already changed the playing field. Prices rise, assets inflate, the cost of living creeps up, not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. And the people who feel it most are the ones farthest from the money's point of entry: savers, wage earners, people on fixed incomes. This is not an accident, it's a feature. Inflation is often described as a mysterious force, a result of supply chains or market pressures. But at its core, inflation is dilution. When the supply of money grows faster than the supply of real goods and services, each unit of money buys less. Your paycheck still says the same number. Your bank balance looks familiar, but quietly, purchasing power leaks away. That loss is the tax. No legislation required, no public debate, no visible collection, just erosion. Now zoom out. Wars are uniquely suited to be funded this way. They're urgent, they're framed as necessary, they're politically risky to oppose once they begin, and they're open-ended. A bridge has a budget, a school has a budget, a war has a narrative. As long as the narrative holds, the spending continues. And because the cost is spread across millions of people through inflation and debt, no single group feels enough pain to stop it. That's the genius of the system. There's another layer most people miss. Debt doesn't just fund wars, it changes how governments think about time. When costs are immediate, leaders must justify them to voters now. When costs are deferred, leaders only need to manage perception today and leave consequences for tomorrow. Future taxpayers, people not yet voting, not yet born, become silent participants in the deal. Wars stop being something a nation pays for together. They become something the future is charged for. Look at the numbers. In the early 2000s, major military operations were launched with the promise they would be short, decisive, and affordable. Instead, decades passed. The wars were financed almost entirely through borrowing. Interest alone, just the cost of servicing that debt, will eventually rival or exceed the original military spending itself.
This means even after the fighting ends, the tax continues. Long after the headlines fade, the bill keeps arriving. And here's the uncomfortable irony. Inflation caused by war spending doesn't just hurt households, It also conveniently reduces the real value of government debt. If prices double over time, the government repays old debt with cheaper money. From the state's perspective, inflation is painful but manageable. From the citizen's perspective, it's corrosive. Your savings shrink, your rent rises, your long-term plans get harder to sustain. The war may be thousands of miles away, but the cost shows up in grocery aisles and housing markets. At this point, some people push back. They say, governments always spent money. Inflation happens for many reasons. That's true, but scale matters. Modern wars are not funded by one-time expenses. They're funded by continuous monetary expansion layered on top of existing debt. And unlike a natural disaster or emergency spending at home, wars don't create productive assets for the domestic economy. A bomb doesn't generate future tax revenue. A missile doesn't improve productivity. A destroyed city doesn't repay interest. The spending disappears, economically speaking, while the debt remains. This leads to a strange contradiction. Wars are sold as national defense, but they weaken the financial position of the nation over time. More debt, more inflation pressure, less fiscal flexibility. And because the cost is hidden, it rarely becomes a decisive political issue. If wars were funded by direct taxes, public support would collapse much faster. That's not speculation, we've seen it. Historically, when citizens are asked to pay up front, wars become shorter or never start at all. There's also a psychological element. A visible tax creates resistance. An invisible tax creates apathy. If prices rise slowly enough, people adapt. They blame corporations. They blame supply chains. They blame abstract forces. Rarely do they trace the cost back to decisions made years earlier under different administrations, justified by different crises. By the time the connection becomes obvious, it's too late to reverse. The system also changes who benefits. When war is funded through borrowing and money creation, those closest to capital markets tend to gain. Asset prices rise, stocks and real estate inflate. Debt becomes easier to manage for those who already own things. Meanwhile, people whose wealth is primarily their labor fall behind. So the hidden tax doesn't just fund war, it redistributes wealth, quietly, reliably, upward. None of this requires conspiracy. It doesn't require secret meetings or malicious intent. It's the natural outcome of incentives. Politicians want flexibility. Central banks want stability. Markets want liquidity. The hidden tax satisfies all three, at least in the short term. The problem is what happens over decades. Over time, constant war financing through debt and inflation reshapes the economy. It normalizes permanent deficits. It blurs the line between emergency spending and routine policy. It trains governments to expect monetary support for political decisions, and it trains citizens not to ask how things are paid for, because the answer is uncomfortable. So here's the question that rarely gets asked out loud. If wars had to be funded transparently, through immediate taxes or visible sacrifices, how many would actually happen? How many would last as long? How many would survive public scrutiny once the true cost was felt in real time? The hidden tax doesn't just pay for wars, it makes endless war possible. And that brings us to the quietest part of this entire system. There is no clear endpoint. Debt rolls over. Inflation compounds. New crises justify new spending. Each conflict sets a precedent for the next. The cost never fully resets. It just blends into the background of everyday life. You can live your entire life under this system and never see a bill that says war, but you will feel it. In higher prices, in diluted savings, in a future that feels more expensive and less stable than the past. And the most unsettling part isn't that this tax exists, it's that it works so well precisely because most people never notice it. So the real question isn't whether wars are expensive, it's whether a society can remain democratic when the true cost of its biggest decisions is hidden in plain sight. Because once a government learns it can fight without asking its citizens to pay directly,